everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty wild, how animals remember.
It's not just about brains either.
Yeah, you got it. And we're going to be taking a look at this book on learning memory and evolution. And chapter 7 specifically had some really, really interesting examples.
Some stuff that really makes you rethink what memory is.
Yeah, it does. It talks about birds learning songs and octopuses changing color.
Yeah.
Even bacteria have a kind of memory in their immune systems.
Like a kind of intelligence that exists outside the brain.
Totally. So by the end of this, you're going to have like a whole new appreciation for how animals use information and store it.
Yeah.
And how that ties into their survival.
Exactly.
So the book starts off with this idea of genes being like a book of the dead.
A little bit ominous sounding.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting way to put it. Like, imagine inheriting a survival guide from your ancestors.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about genes.
Yeah.
They contain information from past environments which help animals survive in the world.
So it's not just an abstract idea. These genetic memories are literally written on our skin.
Like skin color.
Yeah.
For example, you live in a sunny area. You probably have darker skin than I do.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's a direct inheritance from your ancestors who lived in a place with a lot more sunlight.
And vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Like, people in places with less sunlight needed to absorb more vitamin D.
And that's why they evolved lighter skin. It's all in the genes.
Wow, that's fascinating. But the thing is, the world changes a lot faster than genes can keep up. So that's where learning comes in.
Right.
Animals have to be able to change their behavior during their lifetime to survive. The book talks about operant conditioning. Do you remember those Skinner box experiments?
With the rats pressing levers to get food.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, classic stuff.
So they learn through rewards and punishments,
Right.
right? They try different things and they figure out what leads to positive outcomes and what leads to negative outcomes.
Yeah, it's all about associating actions with consequences.
Like that example in the book with the chickens that learned to peck keys to get a heat reward. Not even food.
That was an interesting one. Shows that what an animal finds rewarding is determined by its needs and its environment.
And those needs are shaped by natural selection and are encoded in the genes.
It makes you wonder if we could artificially breed animals with different definitions of reward.
Oh, like imagine pigeons that love Mozart and hate Stravinsky.
Oh, that's a thought.
Uh-huh. But let's move on to another cool example. Birdsong.
Yeah, birdsong's fascinating.
It really is. It's like a symphony of nature. But there's a lot more to it than just beautiful sounds. This book talks about the Beau-Geste hypothesis. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. So basically, birds with large repertoires of songs might actually be trying to scare off rivals.
So it's like they're making it seem like there are more birds in the area than there really are.
Exactly. If you're a rival bird entering a territory and you hear all these different songs, you might think twice about sticking around.
So it's like they're putting on a show of force, just with their voices.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The book also talks about how young birds learn their songs.
Oh, yeah. Some birds have like an innate template for their song, right?
Like song sparrows. They just know how to sing their species song.
But others learn it from their parents.
Yeah, like white-crowned sparrows. They actually record their father's song when they're young.
It's crazy that they can do that. And what's even more mind-blowing is that some birds can develop almost perfect songs even if they're deaf.
Yeah, it really shows the power of those internal templates. Like there's this deep-seated drive to produce the right sounds.
Almost like an aesthetic sense in birds.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But this deep dive into memory goes beyond just the brain.
It does. The book emphasizes that memory exists outside of those neural pathways as well.
Like the immune system. It has a kind of memory.
It's like our bodies keep a record of every infection they've fought off.
A molecular memory.
Mm.
And that's actually how mRNA vaccines work.
Oh, right. They basically give our immune systems a mugshot of the virus.
Yeah, so that it knows what to attack.
That's really cool.
But
Now, for something totally different, what about camouflage in octopuses?
Oh yeah, they can change their skin color and texture to blend in perfectly.
It's like visual memory in action. The book had this amazing anecdote about an octopus that instantly changed from seaweed camouflage to ghostly white to scare off a predator.
Talk about adaptive.
Right. It's incredible how quickly they can change their appearance. So we've seen that memory can take many forms, from genes to learned behaviors to these amazing molecular and visual systems.
And that leads us to our final point for this part of the deep dive, imagination.
Imagination.
Yeah, the book presents it as a way for animals to simulate the future, like envisioning the consequences of their actions.
So it's not just remembering the past, it's using those memories to predict the future.
Exactly. It's like an internal trial and error, a what-if generator.
So like the baboon seeing the bananas on a plank over a cliff.
Exactly. A smart baboon wouldn't just charge forward. It would imagine different scenarios, like pulling the plank in or using a stick to reach the bananas.
So they're problem-solving in their minds before taking any action.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's really the foundation for more complex forms of imagination. But for now, let's take a moment to process all this amazing info on animal memory before we dive into the next part.
Sounds good.
And welcome back to our deep dive into animal memory. We were talking about imagination before the break, that ability to simulate the future.
Yeah, to play out those what-if scenarios. It's amazing to think that something so complex is tied to those basic survival instincts.
Like a fear of heights. The book suggests that might be connected to this internal simulation process.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, think about it from an evolutionary perspective. A fear of heights could be a leftover from our tree-dwelling ancestors.
Right. The ones who weren't afraid of heights probably didn't survive to pass on their genes.
Exactly. So even though most of us aren't swinging through trees anymore, that ancient wisdom is still kind of there in our DNA.
Yeah, it makes sense. I definitely still get a little nervous when I'm up high.
Of course. But it's not just genes. Learning plays a role too. Like young animals, they learn to be afraid of heights through experience.
Right. A tumble from even a small height sends the strong message. Stay away from the edge.
Exactly. So it's a combination of instinct and experience that shapes our behavior.
Makes you wonder how much of what we do is driven by these ancient survival mechanisms, even if we're not aware of it.
It's a fascinating question. But let's go back to those baboons we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the scenario with the bananas on a plank over a cliff?
Uh-huh.
Some baboons might not just avoid the cliff altogether.
You mean they might actually try to get the bananas? That seems risky.
It is. But the book highlights how some baboons might actually use their imagination to come up with creative solutions.
Like what?
Well, instead of just charging forward, they might picture themselves pulling the plank in.
Yeah.
Or maybe using a stick to reach the bananas.
So they're like problem solving in their minds before they do anything in the real world.
That's exactly it. And that's what sets the stage for some of the most incredible feats of human creativity.
Whoa. You're saying that our ability to write novels or compose music or develop scientific theories all stems from that basic survival mechanism.
It highlights the incredible power of the mind, and how even our most complex abilities are rooted in these fundamental processes that evolved over millions of years.
That's mind-blowing. It's amazing how something essential for survival could give rise to such diverse expressions in humans. But before we get too carried away with human imagination, I want to shift gears a bit. The book also talks about learning from others.
Oh yeah, that's a huge part of animal behavior, especially for animals that live in groups.
Like chimpanzees, they learn how to use tools by watching their elders.
It's like a form of cultural inheritance, passing down traditions from one generation to the next.
Right. The book mentioned the Japanese macaques that learned to wash sweet potatoes. It started with just one individual, and then the whole troop was doing it.
It's amazing how those behaviors can spread, and it makes sense. It gives animals a huge advantage.
They can avoid costly mistakes and learn valuable skills without having to figure everything out on their own.
Exactly. And sometimes those learned behaviors can lead to some pretty unexpected innovations, like those British tits that figured out how to peck through milk bottle caps to get to the cream.
Wow, talk about adapting to your environment. So learning is a constant process, shaped by both innate predispositions and the challenges of a changing world. But before we get to the final part of our exploration of memory, let's pause here for a moment. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into animal memory. We've covered a lot of ground, from genes to learning to imagination, but there's one crucial piece of the puzzle we haven't fully explored yet: the immune system.
Absolutely. The immune system is like this amazing internal defense force, constantly learning and adapting to protect us from threats.
It's mind-blowing to think that our bodies are fighting off these microscopic invaders all the time without us even realizing it.
It really is. And it's not just vertebrates that have these incredible defenses. Even bacteria have evolved ways to combat viral infections.
The bacteria, those single-celled organisms.
Yeah, they have a system that's actually quite similar to how we might keep track of criminals. They store fragments of viral DNA within their own chromosomes.
So it's like they have this genetic most wanted list, helping them recognize and fight off repeat offenders.
Exactly. If the same virus tries to attack again, they can quickly identify and neutralize it. And this system called CRISPR has actually revolutionized modern science.
How so?
Where researchers have figured out how to use this bacterial defense mechanism to edit genes in other organisms, including humans.
Wow. So understanding the natural world, even the tiniest organisms, can lead to some pretty amazing breakthroughs. But let's get back to our own immune systems. The book explains that our immune memory works a bit differently than bacteria.
It's based on a sort of internal competition and selection process. Imagine a vast army of immune cells, each equipped with unique receptors that can bind to specific invaders. When a new threat enters, it's like a battle royale.
So only the cells with receptors that match the invader survive and multiply.
Precisely. And those winning cells form the basis of our immune memory. It's why we develop immunity to diseases we've already had, or after we've been vaccinated.
Ah, vaccines. That brings us back to those mRNA vaccines we talked about earlier. They're another example of how scientists have harnessed the power of the immune system, right?
Absolutely. mRNA vaccines deliver instructions to our cells, teaching them how to produce a specific viral protein. And this protein then triggers the immune response, just like a traditional vaccine, but without introducing the actual virus.
It's amazing how we can leverage these natural processes for our benefit. So as we wrap up this deep dive into animal memory, what are some key takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember?
Well, first, I hope they'll remember that memory is so much more than just what happens in the brain. It's embedded in our very biology, from our genes to our immune systems to the behaviors we learn throughout our lives.
And that learning and adapting is essential for survival in a constantly changing world.
Exactly. Whether you're a bacteria fighting off a virus or a baboon, figuring out how to get those bananas the ability to learn and remember is key to navigating the challenges of life. And finally, I hope our listeners will appreciate the beauty and complexity of the natural world. The study of animal memory not only reveals the wonders of nature, but it also inspires innovations that can benefit humanity.
Absolutely. It's been an incredible journey exploring the diverse ways animals store and use information. We've talked about chickens pecking for warmth, baboons imagining solutions, bacteria fighting off viruses. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to explore. Who knows what other forms of memory might be out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And that's what makes it so exciting, right? There's always something new to uncover. Yeah.
It makes you wonder what our future scientist, SOF, is going to discover. And to you, dear listener, we encourage you to keep those curious minds engaged. If memory is all about predicting the future, what other unexpected places might those palimpsest scripts be hidden within the animal kingdom? It's a question worth pondering. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into animal memory. Until next time.